Hi, I am Jeffrey Warnick, and welcome to this week Fine Points again, of course, with Bruce Fine. I'd like to let everybody know to manage expectations is that this is the not only the last Fine Points of the year, it'll be the last pod shoot of the year. I don't think we'll be returning until the middle of January because I will be traveling for several weeks. So going to take a little trip for the holidays and come back, I think, like the second week in January. So we'll resume, after I get back. So it's always a pleasure to welcome Bruce to another Fine Points, and it's just it's adjusting that the last Fine Points, the last pot shoot of the year is the Fine Points with Bruce. Um, so Bruce, really happy to see you. Bruce, as always, I like to make some for initial observations, as I almost always do. I think I find several things kind of ironic. The most ironic thing is that we get this commission, this doggy commission. Doggy commission is gonna, as they promised, move um, $2 trillion a year out of the budget. Well, removing $2 trillion a year should then not require any sort of increase in the debt ceiling. So apparently, one of the things Trump didn't want to negotiate. I kept reading all this massive spending, but ultimately, the bill that they shortened a lot. So there's a lot of less words in the bill, but there's not a lot of less spending in the bill. So, and there's a lot of spending by entities they describe as the deep state. So there's a lot of funding for the deep state. Only just a lot less words to spend. A similar amount of money. And one of the things Trump asked for was basically through this session of Congress, where the Republicans have, a small majority in the very small majority in the House and a majority in the Senate. Not huge, but decent size from historical standards, where we've only had been separated by one or two, and now I think it's like 53-47 more or less, 54-46. So I guess that he wants to be able to, for his term, be able to extend the debt ceiling as much as he can, with the expectations that the Republicans would rubber stamp everything he did, and the Democratic Party could be, completely ignored, and until the midterm elections. So because the midterm elections might be a different negotiation if the Democrats get control of one or both of the branches of Congress. Then he might want to be able to use the debt ceiling as a threat against them, but he doesn't want them to be able to use it as a threat against him. So ironically, Trump wants to be unimpeded in extending the deficit as much as he can, and not have to go back to Congress and get approval for doing so. At the same time, we have a commission that says they're going to cut spending by $2 trillion a year. So that's kind of ironic. I haven't seen, if I don't really pay attention to X, but I haven't seen news articles of Musk saying, yeah, the doggy loves this. We love having no debt ceiling, so we can issue as much debt as possible. That's what we're really all about, the doggy commission. Is spending money and not having to worry about getting the consent of Congress to continue to extend, the deficit. So I found that kind of important. And the Republicans, like Chip Roy, who one of the leaders of leading the charge about coming out and being outspoken about the fact that he would not expand the deficit if there was not real tangible spending cuts. And so he had to see a commitment to spending cuts before he would agree to increase. He didn't think he said it. He saw those spending cuts. So now he's the rhino. Okay. So he's the one that's a self-serving promoter, who's an obstructionist, who doesn't want to help make America great, who doesn't want to win, because because he doesn't want to accept the fact that that the government should spend without any limit to its spending. So, and Trump wants the government to spend without any limit to its spending. So, how much it increases its deficit. So, I find that very ironic. I also find ironic the fact is if you take a look at what the doggy posted on X about the deficit. They looked at things like the stadium was adding to the deficit of the RFK Stadium. The only thing that was happening with RFK Stadium was the federal government was transferring it to the local government, so the local government could compete for basically signing a contract with the football team, the Washington Commanders, who are currently in Maryland, and so the DC wants to make an effort to win back the Washington Commanders, and apparently the Doggy Commission thinks it's inefficient for the government to transfer so apparently it's very efficient for the government to have this land that who knows, maybe they will have maybe they'll build a data center there for X, and they'll find that as the best use of the land as a data center, for X or a launch pad for SpaceX or something like that, and they'll find that that's the most efficient use, for that piece of land. But one of the things they know is an inefficient use for that land, giving it to the local government and letting the government try and get back a football team that might be good for the local economy, and they want to give them an opportunity of at least competing against, Landover, Maryland, which is where the Washington Commanders, currently are. So the other thing they gave is, I think, from what I've read, they made a misrepresentation on the salary increase for Congress, for members of Congress. I think it's like a 4% annual increase or something like that. And I think the higher number was what I read in one article was calculated because there might have been a misunderstanding that since 2009, Congress had the expectations of being entitled to a cost of living increase. They have not gotten a cost of living increase since 2009. So the number that I read in one article that number of that huge increase from like 173 to 2 something or other, whatever the number was, that was a large increase, would have been a catch up for all the years that they did not get a cost of living increase. But from what I read in an article, it says that the bill did not allow that catch up. It's just allowing a maximum level of increase for 2025, and that was like 4% or something like that. For what I read about, so it's material less. So I don't know how literate the doggy people are. I don't know if they actually read the bill or read somebody's number and took that as the truth without doing much fact checking on it. And so they might have been promoting misinformation, not intentionally, but the bottom line is, whatever the proposals they made on why they were objecting to the bill, it didn't seem to me any of them would make the government more efficient. And given the fact that the spending was that they accused of, well, they used the word massive. They used massive spending bill, but none of those were massive spending issues. So they were not a material part of the spending being done. So the spending still would have been massive, even if you would have eliminated those things. It would still be a massive spending bill. So I guess we have the first signs of how the doggy commissions, seems like a dog to me. But the one other insight I want to make, because I shared that with you, that I would like you to address, is this Fannie Willis thing. I guess she's not been accused of having any sort of conflict or any sort of nefarious motives. Or having acted with impropriety. It's the appearance of impropriety. I guess the appearance of impropriety is okay for Supreme Court judges. So that's okay for them. They can get millions of dollars of vacations and all these other benefits, and they can get knighted elsewhere and all the other type of things that they're really not supposed to do. But but we don't want to hold the Supreme Court to too high a standard, because after all, it's the highest court in the land. So we don't want them to have too high a standard, but we certainly want Fannie Willis to have a higher standard. So basically, the accusation, from my understanding is, and you could correct me if my understanding is wrong, is that kind of the allegations that the people who have been charged by her have made the claim that really the reason she did this lawsuit was not to actually pursue justice, but to generate legal fees for her boyfriend, her then boyfriend. So this was like a fabricated legal case. It was just a legal case. It's just as a pretense to get him money, and that was the only goal of this case. Was, well, I got to get Wade some money. So how do I do it? Well, let me go after the president and a whole bunch of other people. I really don't have a case here, but we're dating, and I'd like him to give me a nicer lifestyle while we're dating. So he has some good income, and that is the main reason, and that's supposedly is the act of impropriety. And basically, the appeals court said, well, the trial judge said this was improper, and it had the appearance of being improper. But if the trial judge made that statement, and given the fact that the trial judge made that statement, the remedy the trial judge came up with was not sufficient. That the trial judge should have removed, if really believed that this was like fruit of a poison tree. So that, I don't know, maybe that's a bad way of saying it. I don't know the expression very well. So, but that the whole thing was tainted at its roots, and therefore, the case can go on. Only her involvement taints it, because there's this taint out there that she acted without any evidence that she acted improperly, and that there were improper motives, and that the only way that justice is served is not that the case is dropped, but that she's dropped from the case, even though all the appeals judges know that her dropping her probably will have the consequence of dropping the case. So that's a long opening statement, but thank you for indulging me.
It sounds, I don't want to be a little bit pecan here, but it sounds like being a witness before the Senate Judiciary Committee when Joe Biden was the chairman, and he would take 30 minutes to ask a question, and he would add 1 minute to answer, and that was the end of the hearing. That was the way Joe Biden conducted the Senate Judiciary Committee. But let me go into a couple of the issues that you've raised here, Jeffrey. Number one, it's surely true that the so-called Doge Commission, it mistakes fleas for elephants. These are very, very tiny cuts, changing daylight savings time. The fact is that 2024 marked the first time historically where the interest, the carrying cost on the national debt exceeded what I call the $1 trillion military industrial security complex. And it's only getting worse. Interest rates will rise. The debt keeps climbing towards 50 trillion. It's like 35, 36 trillion at present. It wasn't an issue in the campaign. And they're not really serious about cutting anything that's substantial. It is all, I think, just appearances by making flamboyant statements. And I think Mr. Trump has found that he can at least fool many of his supporters, if not all the time, most of the time. And even though it will do nothing to, in fact, slash or cut the deficit, it'll increase the deficit as it has for the last successive 30 years. But as long as he says the deficit's coming down, people will believe him. So I think this is just like watching a movie. There's nothing serious about it. It's just creating a pretense that there's going to be substantial cuts, but it's not going to happen. Just for example, if there were an effort to try to deport all of the undocumented, some of them here, illegal aliens, that is, if you cross the border without a proper visa, as opposed to overstay, that is a crime, you would have to increase the budget of DHS tens of billions of dollars. And that's going to add to the deficit, not diminish it. And we don't have any proposal by the Doge Commission to slash into, I repeat, the military industrial security complex, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion. And a lot of that, of course, goes to Musk entities like SpaceX. Like our greatest threat is that Martians may get here before we colonize Mars, and then solve all the problems of the species by thinking if you move to a new planet, all of our vices disappear. The DNA changes.
Well, of course we can get rid of all piloted aircraft, and by unmanned aircraft, guided by one of Elon Musk's companies. But don't worry, he's not going to make a profit on it. He's not doing this. He puts the country first. He's not doing this because he wants to make money. So even though he has had the greatest accretion, I did a calculation as of 2 days ago, and the Nasdaq since around November 4th, November 5th is up about was up about 15% at the time. It's about 2 days ago. What's known as what I call the MAGA F stocks. That's a Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook, now Meta. They were up somewhere between 5 to 12, 13% during this period of time, and Tesla was up almost 90%. So so the market's saying that since the election, Tesla's worth almost twice what it was before the election. And why do you think the market that because Musk?
I think what it is, Jeffrey, it's an earmark of crony capitalism. They know
cronyism. Capitalism is not cronyism. So there's cronyism and capitalism. I don't believe should be used in the same sentence.
Yeah, it's right. It's just cronyism without the capitalism, right? There's no capitalism element in it, because all it is manipulating government power to shield you from competition. So then you can charge super competitive prices. But I'd like to go back to the Fani Willis case to add to what you observed, and that is there have been a handful of defendants in that case who have already pled guilty, including Trump's attorneys, which indicates, well, if it was just a hacked case, why were they pleading guilty? And these were people who were represented by lawyers who were highly paid. Moreover, you ask about Fani Willis. It was a 2-to-1.
And some had proffered in their guilty plea to cooperate.
Yeah, and to testify against other defendants, for sure. Yes. So it's clear that this was not a phony case. And remember, you have in Georgia, by and large, Republican judges. There was a Republican judge who decided not to disqualify Fani Willis. And in Georgia, as in every other place, Jeffrey, you have an opportunity, if you're a defendant, to make a motion to have your case dismissed because there's not probable cause to believe the crime alleged occurred. They haven't had any of the cases dismissed. So if it's a witch hunt, maybe this is a witch hunt that actually found something.
Well, actually, the Court of Appeals seemed to indicate it's not a witch hunt because the Court of Appeals decided not to dismiss the case.
Exactly.
And what was up were two things: her removal and the dismissal of the charges. So the court said that the charges would not be dismissed, which meant the court believed there might have been some substance to the charges themselves. And even though she had already begun to have success, that somehow her impropriety for hiring this guy, has tainted her role in this case, even though he's been removed now. So going forward, obviously there's nothing that will happen in the case that will be of benefit to her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, or maybe ex-boyfriend, whoever knows the circumstances, whoever gives a shit about them. But the point of it is that seems to be a pretty low bar for what would be improper now, because it was successful. And I watched the judge. I watched the former judge, who seemed to be respected by everybody in the courtroom, who she made the offer to run the case on behalf of the state. I don't remember the guy's name, but I remember that.
Yeah, yes, I think he was a former governor, but very highly respected. Yes,
very highly respected by everybody in the courtroom. That was very evident to me. And when he was asked why he didn't want to do it, his answer pretty much was I don't want what will happen to my life once I'm involved in this case. And what does he seem to mean by that is the doxing, the death threats, the harassment, because that's what goes along, with, if you take on a case of this magnitude against the president. Many of his followers are vigorous followers of him, and they don't like, and they think anybody is a traitor who's doing a witch hunt against their savior, and therefore is a treasonous enemy of the state. So it's that. Think about how sad it is for our justice system that we have this well-respected former governor who doesn't want to take the case because of how people will respond to a case like this and how it'll disrupt his life. So wouldn't it be natural if you have a circumstance that it would be hard to find, yet you really need to have in a case like this, you have to have a team that you really trust, and that it's not necessarily easy to recruit people onto a team because many people do not want to say the money is not worth the hassle. So
let me interject,
I
Jeffrey.
assume these judges are not stupid people. Okay.
And historical analogy, I think, shows the difference today from yesteryear, if you will. I remember Watergate and Archibald Cox and his ability to recruit people. I knew many of them. I stayed at the Justice Department, but I was one. Everyone was eager to come. The idea that you would be destroyed because you're trying to enforce the rule of law against the president was preposterous. There was no one who worked with Archibald Cox who suffered any kind of defamation. If anything, they made careers afterwards. And very talented people came. They didn't get super salaries. They had to give up some compensation because the government has very low ceilings. And that was important because you really had first-rate lawyers arguing the Watergate cases, and one reason why they won virtually all of the time. And now we have a situation with Mr. Smith and some of his colleagues now being threatened. Well, even if we don't actually convict you of crimes, we're coming after you with grand juries. We're going to charge you with XYZ. As you pointed out, I think in one of your tweets or whatever, Jeffrey, we have lawyers who are going to be populating the department who believe President Trump is the second coming of Jesus, and therefore anybody who touches him is engaged in blasphemy. We need to go after them. That are going to use, at least their intent is to use the department to harass what they view as their political opponents. And if this happens, the next time there's a special counsel, they're not going to be anybody who will work with them. The price will be too high, with rare exceptions. And that will be compromise of the necessity to have high quality lawyers participate in these kinds of cases. So the law is right and everything is above suspicion, because these issues that are being addressed, they're not auto accident cases. They require a lot of wisdom, a lot of depth, a lot of experience, and that's not come upon by people who are 3 years out of law school. I'll call them second-rate law schools. I don't want to sound elitist, but oftentimes that's where we are at present when you look at the kinds of people that Mr. Trump has recruited, which is why many of them, 2 or 3, even Mr. Giuliani, have been disbarred because their legal conduct was so disreputable.
Yes. So I think probably the Atlanta case goes away. I think now this is up to a Republican appointed, nominees, I guess, to determine whether they're going to appoint somebody to continue to pursue this. Because again, this is not just Trump. There's a whole bunch of other people who were, co-conspirators in this. I think it's an application of RICO laws that Fannie Willis applied. So
it was more than that, Jeffrey. It was fraud, because one of the counts was that there were fraudulent representations made by members of the Georgia legislature that they were truly elected presidential electors who were supposed to be involved in the final tally to see who won 2020. And they made up the fact that and represented in documents that they were properly elected. I mean, that's more serious to me than RICO violations, because you're trying to corrupt the entire process upon which we defend. So we are not taking out AK-47s to decide who is the next occupant of the White House. So those are very serious. Now, there's one other level of review here, Jeffrey. There are three levels in the Georgia state system: the trial level, the intermediate court, and then they've already been filed in the Georgia Supreme Court an effort to overturn the disqualification of Fani Willis. But there's also another element that's looming, and that is Trump's lawyers surely are going to be arguing, as they did in the New York case, without success, however, that the Supreme Court's decision in Trump v. U.S. immunizes Trump from state prosecutions as well as federal prosecutions, any time that he is in the White House, according to the an Office of Legal Counsel, Justice Department memorandum. That is an issue that's never confronted before, because we've never had a president-elect before who's been convicted of crimes or facing criminal charges in state courts. But that's still something that has yet to be decided. But I think the larger issue, Jeffrey, is whatever happens ultimately, it's going to take so long that the Trump presidency may end by that point. They have so many delaying tactics, and unfortunately, I believe that the courts have been irresponsible in letting the delay occur. There's no reason why these events that happened almost 4 years ago, and here we're just at trial stage. I think the justice system and the courts and the prosecutors were just much, much too slovenly here. They should have been right on this, within 6 months, because the theory and the narrative is plain to anybody who could watch TV on January 6th.
What's your best explanation for why it took them so long? I mean, do you believe there was a political calculation in doing this? Do you believe it just took them this long to build the team and build the case and make sure it would be reasonably bulletproof, with the expectation that Trump is quite expert at these dilatory tactics, and of course with the contributions he's got a basically endless source of money, not his own, one that he's very successful getting his followers to pay for his legal fees, because they're coming from donations into the various entities he set up, that is paying all these legal fees. So they're not coming out of his pocket. And I think curiously, he also said, with respect to this pollster in Iowa who apparently did a really burn their reputation, thinking that Harris was seemed to be doing better in Iowa, and I think Trump ended up winning Iowa by like 10 points. And now he's going after her for election interference. And in the press conference he gave, he talked about the fact that these legal filings are really expensive and that he should not be the one having to do this, that somebody else should do it. He's not giving instructions for that person to do it, but he thinks, as the incoming president, that it's the job of the Department of Justice to do these things. But he's not giving orders, but he's reminding him that, of course, I think this is your job. I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm telling you to do your job. And part of doing your job is doing this, but I'm not telling you to do it. Okay.
No. Yeah. Jeffrey, I got to intercede. That's like Henry II, Thomas à Becket. Who will rid me of this dishonorable, turbulent priest? Oh, I really didn't tell you to kill Becket. He just disappeared on his own, right? Yeah. So they know how to read the tea leaves in Washington pretty well. So he's clearly wanting to use the government institutions to go enrich himself personally, like he's done in the first term, where he used his Trump Hotel to get all the foreigners that were coming visiting him and all the lobbyists to stay, at $7 or $8 or $9 or $1,000 a night to enrich his hotel profits. Probably violating the domestic emoluments clause. So we have but then you did ask, was there a political calculation in this delay? I think the answer is yes. I think there were those who thought that the issues were so raw right after January 6th that they thought maybe if they indicted Trump early, he would get even more support. It might cause more disruption. Because you remember, right after January 6th, there were death threats on the poll workers down in Georgia. They were almost forced into isolation for month after month. They ultimately sued Giuliani and won $150 million. So I think there was a calculation, well, it's going to be too politically dicey. And I also think in some way that at that time, we're going forward with impeachment, the second impeachment trial of Trump. And some Democrats, I believe, and I think this was surely true of perhaps Biden and maybe Garland. Well, the Republicans might implode if you can divide them between Trump and those who are, less radical. Thinking especially because the majority leader, Mitch McConnell, had at least initially said he was walking away from Trump. He ultimately came back to him like everybody else has. So the calculation from the Democrats was, hey, let's let this simmer a little bit longer. Let's not end it now because the Republican Party could become unglued. Unfortunately, they were all wrong. I mean, basically, the Republican Party unified behind Trump, including Mitch McConnell. So it destroyed that calculation. And ultimately, I believe he was able to run out the clock. Because look, if you take the New York case, 34 felonies, you can see you can run these trials. There wasn't all that complex factual narrative. January 6th wasn't a complex factual narrative. You had videotapes. It was obvious what was going on. You had Mr. Trump watching TV and doing nothing while he could see his vice presidents and his family under attack and possibly threatened with death. He did nothing for 3 hours. What more do you need? Early on, we knew that on January 6th in the morning that Mr. Trump had approached the vice president, Mr. Pence, and said, Mike, you got to choose between me and the Constitution. Go up there and follow me and deny the Constitution, your obligation to count these electoral votes. So the evidence was already in the public domain. You don't need conviction and jump on the gravesite beyond any doubt. The standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. And you could see how fast the New York case went. You had 34 felonies, and I think the jury deliberated like a couple of hours after 3 weeks. I don't believe this was any shortage of evidence. I think it was a calculated political decision to think, well, maybe keep them hanging in the wind. It'll destroy the Republican Party. Unfortunately, it was a very, very stupid and bad calculation.
Well, but that's different than the documents case, which many people thought was the case where that they had the strongest case and the easiest to prove, and that was the one in front of Eileen Cannon, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
but
first,
she just sat on it.
First, Eileen Cannon sat on it for a long period of time, and then decided to use Thomas's statement on a case that had nothing to do with this topic, where Thomas said, he thinks Jack Smith's appointment is not constitutionally correct or something like that. And she basically used his statement, and Thomas's statement on a Supreme Court issue had nothing to do with that issue. At the time, it was just an ad hominem comment he threw off, I guess, hoping that Eileen Cannon would use it. So I guess he said it hoping it would be used in one of the trials against Trump.
Yeah, it was clearly gratuitous. Yeah, I mean, he used that. And moreover, it was contrary. I was there. I was in Washington at the Supreme Court in the case of U.S. versus Nixon. Leon Jaworski was a special prosecutor appointed the same way Jack Smith was, after Archibald Cox was fired. And the issue was raised, well, does he have standing to argue the tapes case as special prosecutor? And the court gave one paragraph, said, of course, this had been a tradition that had been followed for ever back since Teapot Dome in the 1920s. And so one justice astray aside and taking on a unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, it was 8-0 in the U.S. versus Nixon case. It was extraordinary. And what really puzzled me, Jeffrey, is why the department didn't. You can go up. It's called a writ of mandamus. They should have tried to get rid of her even well before the ruling on the special counsel issue, because she was delaying everything. She was asking them at the early stages of the case, can you propose jury instructions? You don't propose jury instruction until the evidence is in. There hadn't been any evidence in any case yet because there had been no trial. So she was doing things obviously to prefer the president. She had made this crazy ruling that a special master should be able to screen all these documents that had been subpoenaed before the department could look at them. She was reversed soundly by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit. And I could never understand why they didn't seek a writ of mandamus to get her off the case, recuse her. They didn't ever try that. It was a puzzle to me.
What do you think their logic was?
I think they were just worried. All the politics. Well, it's going to look like, well, we can't win our case. Now you're forum shopping for an anti-Trump judge or something like that. I just think these are just wholly wrongful calculations. But it's clearly filled because they're already looking at Trump. He's a candidate, and Biden's looking for re-election at that time. It wasn't like they're contemplating Kamala Harris coming in and stepping into his shoes. And that's what Washington is like, Jeffrey. The political mind cannot think outside of a universe. How does this help or hit or hurt me politically? That is the total scope of their brain power. And all these, and here it came back and boomeranged on. Totally miscalculated all of these things.
Yeah. So I've insisted to people that for people who still believe that the election was stolen, and I think that having a trial, especially with Trump, because he's the one that has trumpeted most the steal and stopped the steal that he legitimately won, and now he would have a chance in a trial to demonstrate, why he made those statements, and if he provided the evidence that it was a stolen election, then that would probably get him off of all the charges if he could demonstrate that there was merit to these statements and it was a stolen election. That the best way of giving proof is to actually provide evidence that's admissible in a court of law and given under oath. So then, then he could, as president, could be pursuing. He could then tell Kash Patel and other people to begin investigating everyone who perjured themselves at these trials by saying it was not a steal, and when they testified that it was not a steal, that they were telling lies and they could perjure themselves. So it seems to me, if he really believed what he said, he should have welcomed the trial. He should have welcomed, actually presenting to all American people, the evidence that he said he has accumulated. But he's given conflicting comments. He says he has the evidence, but then he also says he's going to appoint people to get the evidence. So then he hired people who said he hasn't, who the people he hired says there is no evidence. So, it's
But Jeffrey, we have a stronger case than that, Jeffrey. There were 61 cases after the election in 2020. 61 cases, federal, state courts, presided over by Trump appointees, Obama appointees, Bush appointees, Clinton appointees, all brought by Mr. Trump or his agents, all challenging in one way or another the outcome in the various states of the electoral count. He lost 61 cases. He could not prove a single ballot had been invalidly cast in those cases. There are a handful of isolated cases.
For lack of standing. He did not.
Yeah, that's right. Some of them were standing and some of them were not. Some were on the merits. And in the handful of cases where there was a stray vote that was illegally cast, most of the stray votes were cast by Trump supporters, not Biden's. They couldn't prove anything that suggested the outcome of any of the state races was impacted by anything that was wrongful. And they had 61 cases. And as you pointed out, Jeffrey, he's got all the money in the world to try to hire all the best attorneys in the world. He couldn't come up with anything. His own hand-picked Attorney General, William Barr, went to the White House and said, I won't use the vulgarities, there's nothing there. You're asking me to investigate nothing. You're asking me whether they're ghosts, in the White House. I'm not going to do it. And he left. And William Barr is not Code Pink. He's not a silent supporter of Joe Biden. He's historically about as conservative as you can get. So this is whole stuff. It's already been investigated and litigated, and you lost. How many more times do we have to do this?
Didn't Ben? I think Ben Ginsburg, who's a Republican, not a pro-Trump Republican, but a Republican, and I think he oversaw a report done. I don't recall I read the report a couple of years ago, and don't remember. But basically, he tried to put together a document that would challenge the lie of Trump that none of these things were investigated. So he had put together a report basically saying what was investigated and what were the results of that investigation. So he oversaw the report. I don't know who the other people were involved in the production of that report, but they provided a pretty extensive report. And a guy who Trump hired wrote a book on the topic as well, saying, Trump hired me. I'm a data expert. I looked into all the things, and my conclusion was, we didn't find anything that was systemic in nature. We found isolated examples, but nothing material in nature. And this was reported to Trump. And of course, this information that is exculpatory, with respect to the claims that this election was stolen, that it was not stolen. Of course, Trump decided not to share that information that was shared with him to the public. He didn't say, I've hired these experts. I'm going to be very transparent about the experts I'm paying for, what they're telling me, and I'm making all that material public. He chose not to make it public. So you got to assume that no expert that he hired came up with anything material in nature, because if they would have, he would have been talking all about it, and they would have been on Fox News and Newsmax, and they would have been interviewed by Joe Rogan, So if whoever had all their evidence, if they had it, okay, we would know their name, and they would be, and they would be on all, the pro-Trump media. Charlie Kirk would be speaking to them. All these people would be speaking to them, and they would be first in line for getting a presidential medal of valor or honor or whatever, freedom or something like that. When Trump comes back to the White House, because they were the one that was able to provide the evidence, incontrovertible evidence that he won. But that person doesn't exist.
No,
so
it's a totally. Remember, Jeffrey,
not exist is because maybe the evidence doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's because you're trying to electrify a corpse is what you're trying to do here. Manufacture something out of nothing. You've omitted, I think, probably inadvertently. Remember the Arizona? They had a private outfit. Clearly, all Trump. Right. They went on and looked at all the ballots. They came up with nothing.
Patrick Byrne.
Utterly ridiculous. And then you have the almost $800 million settlement that Fox News paid to Dominion Voting because they had wrongly accused Dominion of manipulating Trump votes for Biden, in their voting machines. That's a lot of money to pay. And these were the kinds of arguments that were being peddled by Mr. Trump and all of his attorneys, and led to many of them being disbarred. So, there's a limit, a concession to the shortness of life. You can't litigate things forever. And in the 4 years that have elapsed since 2020, no one has come forward with any evidence that shows anything was materially wrong in the 2020 outcome. None.
I don't recall if this is accurate or not. And again, you correct me if not. Didn't the Kraken person, Sidney Powell, that she was going to release the Kraken when she I guess pled guilty in Georgia, wasn't her statement in one of her guilty pleas kind of like my statements were kind of so absurd I never really thought people would take them literally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that was because she would sue Jeffrey with defamation too, and so her argument was the same there. My claims were ridiculous, and anybody who believed them was an idiot, and therefore I really didn't cause any damage, right? Says Sidney Powell. I mean, you can't imagine, these kinds of utter lickspittles doing anything, to get rub shoulders with power. It shows you how corrupting the influence is on these sociopaths who come to Washington. And I apologize because I'm in Washington. But they so crave being something other than being virtuous and wise. I need to have power some way. They sell their soul for a mess of pottage very, very quickly. And unfortunately, most of Washington is populated by those kinds of people. I mean, and just to show you the staggering hypocrisy, one example. In the second impeachment trial, Mitch McConnell, who after he said Trump was responsible for all the evils of January 6th, he voted to acquit Mr. Trump and said, well, listen, the civil and criminal justice system is appropriate to handle the misconduct. We don't need to do this through impeachment. Then after Mr. Trump leaves office and then he's indicted and he's under attack by Jack Smith and others, he turns around and says, oh, this is a witch hunt. We can't use the criminal justice system against somebody who's a candidate for the president. So he totally did 180. He has zero respect for honor, integrity, or anything else. This is somebody who on one day will denounce Trump. The next day he'll go to Mar-a-Lago and try to kiss up to him and suggest, he really isn't all that bad a guy. And that, unfortunately, is the kind of people that we elect to Congress. It's not limited to the Republicans. The Democrats do the same kind of thing. And that's why, in my judgment, the country is in great trouble. We need people of integrity who come to serve. Then they're willing to leave, but they want to do something to cut the size of the government, get it back to where it's supposed to be, and make sure that we all can march to our own drummers. We have law and order. We have court systems. We have invincible self-defense, and that's it. We don't need anything else and shouldn't be doing anything else. All other things simply compromise individual ingenuity and ambition, which are the locomotive of success of any country.
I think that, yes, I read, I try to read all perspectives. So I will read the New York Times, I'll read the Washington Post, and I also read Gateway Pundit, and I also, I don't watch Fox News, but I read some of it in print. So I try and read a cross section of ideological publications that are in conflict or disagreement with each other. So I like to understand everybody's point of view and why they say the things they say and make the claims they make. So like basically, what's our truth machine in the legal system? It's a trial by jury where you have a prosecution defense, and a jury makes no judgment until they hear the evidence presented by all parties, and they don't render judgment until all the evidence has been rendered. So I believe that I as a reader want to listen to all parties make their best case, and then I'll make my own judgment after listening to each party make their best case. So I try and read all sides of the story. You see a lot of the people celebrating in the MAGA side, all the people showing up, bending the knee to Trump, writing checks for his inauguration, and they're celebrating that. For me, that's a sad fact. I mean, the fact that people think that their lives will change by kissing up to anyone who's president, I don't think that's the foundation of George Washington said, you know what, I'm here, come visit me in Mount Vernon, okay? Spend some nights with me in Mount Vernon, pay for my inauguration, pay for my retirement, and maybe a lot of good things will flow your way. And if you don't do that, I'm gonna sick John Jay on you in case you don't do that. So for me, it's a sad fact that being at Mar-a-Lago, being in that crowd, is perceived not only by the people paying it, but by the marketplace, and probably properly perceived as benefiting by their proximity, and that if you're not there, you're going to be a loser if you're not there, and that should be a sad state. People are great. Trump, he's in charge now. Go up and bow down to him. This is what America stands for. Is going and making sure that you make him happy. And good things will flow if you make him happy, and you deserve to be fucked if you don't make him happy. This is the American ideal. This is what James Madison had in mind. The Americans I want to prosper are those that support George Washington. If you don't support George Washington, we don't want you to prosper. Okay.
No, but I always go back to Jeffrey in terms of the cultural decay, the political decay. I celebrate the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. They signed their death warrants and talked about it. They knew, and it wasn't any sure thing that we would win the Revolutionary War. If we didn't win, they're going to be hung as traitors, killed one way or another. And they signed anyway. They weren't anonymous. Anyone could see John Hancock's signature there. They knew what they were risking. Said it's worth it. It's worth the risk to have government by the consent of the governed, to recognize we have unalienable rights because we're born with a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I don't think you could get today anything close to 56 who would sign the Declaration of Independence and take that risk for those high-minded virtues and ambitions. I think you might not even be able to get 5. It reminds me of the Old Testament where Abraham's trying to get Yahweh to save Sodom and Gomorrah if they can find at least not 50, but maybe 5 honest men. But that shows, I think, how far our political culture and general culture.
Abraham was arguing with God, yes, about that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's where we are. And I think and part of this issue, I think, Jeffrey, is we don't have any leaders, and leaders don't have to be in public office, but people who attempt to set standards and role models that'll lift the citizens up and youth to recognize that if we don't hang together behind due process, you're saying you listen to both sides, have a impartial way to resolve disputes, we can't survive. We're going back to the law of the jungle, Kalashnikovs. We'll look like Afghanistan or Pakistan, in 10 or 20 years. And it's a slow deterioration. It hasn't happened all at once. But it's like we're sleepwalking through the last days of the American empire, pretending nothing's going to change. Yeah, it is. Each year it gets worse and worse. When I think back on Watergate, which is 50 years ago, to today, it's like light years difference in cultural values, respect for the rule of law, the norms of civility, and those kinds of things. We've really, really backed up towards the third world, and we're not going to be able to survive much longer if we continue in that direction.
Yeah. I'm gonna repeat. A lot of people say America great. Threaten those tariffs, get people to behave. Make America first, and make every country bend the knee. I say that strategy works only if you're on top, and you're always on top. The day you're not on top, all the people you stepped on to get on top, that they'll be stepping on you. I've given this example before. When I did my first when I created my first company, I had 3 partners. They each owned 20% of my business. I owned the remaining 40%. And when I met with all 3 of them, and they delivered a document to me, which was the agreement that had us form this company together, they signed a doc. They gave me a document, and I was so amazed anybody was putting any money behind any one of my ideas. I didn't even read the document. I was kind of stupid that I was 21, 22 years old. I was amazed that somebody wanted to fund an idea of mine. I was getting 40% of it, and I didn't really pay attention to a lot of the details. So one of the 3 partners calls me into his office. And he says, Jeff, he called me, at my home, and he said, you and I should meet. I know you came in through meeting one of my partners. I want to meet you, and I want to talk with you about the document before we sign it. So when I go into his office, he says, are you a lawyer? I said, no. And I'm kind of puzzled why he's asking me this question. Then he says to me, where's your lawyer? I said, I didn't bring my lawyer. He said to me, what did I tell you I wanted to do with this meeting? You said you wanted to review the document. So you're not a lawyer. You didn't bring your lawyer. You're reviewing a legal document. You're telling me you don't have any skill at reviewing a legal document. And the person who would have skill reviewing the document, you didn't think about bringing to the meeting. So he said, I don't know whether you're a smart, stupid person or just a stupid, stupid person. So I'm completely bewildered. I realize I'm completely out of my element, and I'm thinking that I'm pretty stupid, is what I'm thinking. So he says, okay, you're a young kid. I'm going to go through the contract with you. Your lawyer will understand. He said, do you have a lawyer? I said, yes, I have a lawyer. Okay. So he said, what are you going to do next time I tell you I want to review a legal document? What are you going to do? I think what you're telling me is next time you want to review a legal document, I should bring the lawyer with me. He said, yes. Okay, good. You're beginning to learn. Maybe you're not hopeless after all. So then he goes through and he says, it's his exact words. He says, go to this clause. Okay, I'm not going to explain to you any more detail. I'm just saying, you go to this clause, we're fucking you there. Okay, go to this next clause, we're fucking you there. Okay, go to another clause. So that was all he was telling me. He was telling me clause numbers and saying we're fucking you there. He said, look, or you got to go back to your lawyer. And your lawyer, when he points out all these clauses, your lawyer, competent lawyer, will recognize how we're fucking you in all those clauses. So I don't need to give you the details. Any competent lawyer will recognize where we're fucking you in all the clauses I tell you we're fucking in. So that's what's his exact word. That's what he's telling me. We're fucking you here, we're fucking you here, and we're fucking you here, we're fucking you here. After he got through with telling me exactly all the clauses that they were fucking me, he said, now that we're finished with this conversation, why do you think I'm telling you this? So of course I don't have an answer why he's telling me that. I'm bewildered and kind of intimidated by the whole meeting. I mean, I'm just sort of like dumbstruck the entire meeting, other than taking the notes on all the clauses. He's telling me I got to go speak to my attorney about. So I'm sitting there just waiting to hear his answer because of course I have no clue to what that answer is. So he says, I'm telling you this for a very simple reason. Okay, you actually might be smart, and this might actually be very successful. So a year from now, if this is very successful and you're not as dumb as you are today, and my bet is you probably will not be as dumb as you are today, a year from now, this is success, and you realize you fuck you going in, you will fuck us going out. So I don't want to be fucked going out. Okay, so I'm willing to let you know how we're fucking you today. So a year from now, when you are smart and successful, you will not think I'm the one that fucked you coming in. Okay, because you're going to realize it one day. Okay, because if you're successful, you'll be successful because you got smarter, and if you got smarter, you're going to realize all the things we did to fuck you. So then you're going to look to fuck us. So he said, that's why I don't want you to fuck me tomorrow. So I'm not going to fuck you today, so you don't fuck me tomorrow. Those were exact words, okay? I'm not anything. Those were exact words. So when I went to sell the company, I did not like the other two partners. But he and I became good friends. And the other two partners. One of my reasons, it's not the only reason, one of my reasons to sell the business was to get rid of my two partners. And I'd rather not continue the business and cash out now and continue a relationship with them. And they were not amenable to a buyout if I tried to buy them out. So I just said, I'll just sell the business. They didn't think I would really sell the business. They were confident that I was bluffing and that I wanted to buy them out, but and I was not prepared just to say goodbye to the business. But they didn't read me very well, and I was prepared to do anything to get them out of my life, even if it meant selling the business and giving up upside of the business. That was worth more to me than having to have an ongoing relationship with them. So when I went to the buyer, we agreed to a deal. As the buyer was finishing up all their due diligence documentation, it became aware to the buyer that the two of my partners, I didn't like at all. Okay. And they also were going directly to the buyer saying bad things about me. So they're pretty stupid. So it became evident that there was a dysfunctional relationship. So the buyer came to me and said, with a board member, and said, look, we'll give you complete, we'll make sure we give you all the guarantees and protection that you need and all the indemnifications you require. But instead of us paying 100% for the business, let's pay 75% of the business. You get your 40%. The one you like gets his 20%. There's an extra 15%. You can keep it all for yourself, or you can, however you share that extra 15% between yourself and the partner you do like, and the partners you don't like who made your life difficult, just don't pay them anything. So they didn't put much money in. There's not much downside in it for them. And if they don't get any payout, they deserve it because they were bad partners to you. So they don't deserve anything because they were not accretive to your life. They were negative to your life. So it's win-win-win. You have more money in your pocket. The other guy you like has more money in your pocket, and we have to spend less money, and we all get to the same place, happier and better and more money. And the only people that suffer are the people who deserve to suffer. So this is the just outcome. So I said no to that, because I don't retrade deals. So I said no, and then I went to call my partner who I did like, and I told him, I said, during the meeting, I'm laughing, and I'm laughing because of the fact that, this is what, I'm listening to your words. If you fuck me going in, I will have the ability to fuck you going out if I'm a success. So, the same thing now. If the U.S. uses its power to fuck other countries, okay, we have to be confident that we'll always be in a position to be the fucker rather than the fucked. So, part of my expressions, and that might not always be the case. That's taking a lot for granted. Every empire that thought that they would be a permanent empire and permanently in a position to fuck over whoever they wanted to fuck over, that has been a bad bet. So
Yeah,
whatever.
Jeffrey, let me just interject here, Jeffrey, because there's this historical example of that. It's Thucydides in the history of the Peloponnesian War, the Malian dialogue, where the Athenians want an empire everywhere. So the Malians say, listen, we just want to be neutral. We don't want to take sides with you or Sparta anyway. The Athenians say, no, you either got to pay us tribute or fight with us to expand our empire. And the Malians come back and they say, listen, you're not going to be an empire forever. There's going to be a time when you're going to want to remain neutral. If you screw us, you're going to destroy yourself. The Athenians said, oh, we're going to be an empire forever. We're never going to confront the situation. F you. And so, that's and so it came back to haunt them, just exactly as you've described what we're reenacting the Athenian attitude, and we'll suffer the same fate. Jeffrey, I apologize. I have to go here. I have a meeting I've got to get to. That's okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I thought Johnny had told you, but I've got a board meeting here in Washington. But anyway, thanks for all the audience. Thanks, Jeffrey. You have a wonderful vacation. If I don't talk to you before, I'll see you in January.
Okay, bye, Bruce. And I would like,
Okay.
while Bruce is signing off, I'd like to wish everyone a very Merry Christmas, very happy holidays. My best wishes for everyone that's watching, for everyone that's engaged in BitChute, for everyone that agrees to host me on their screens, and participate in these conversations and participate with the BitChute community. I'm grateful to all of you. I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. I wish you all a very, very happy and blessed New Year. I wish the best for all of us in 2025, and that the coming year brings everyone good health, and good prosperity according to how everyone defines what it means to live a prosperous life. So I really appreciate your participation, all the comments, whether they're flattering or not so flattering. The ones that even all the ones that make fun of me, my physical attributes, or my lack of intellect, or whatever some other accusations that people make. Just the fact that you're engaged, I think is great. So everyone needs to be engaged, and I'm grateful for all that engagement, and I want to thank you very, very much. And I really hope that you have. I don't know if I could show you my Christmas tree here. So here's our Christmas tree. So in our household, we are celebrating Christmas, and so Merry Christmas to all of you. Very, very happy New Year. I hope you enjoy it with loved ones. I hope you all have loved ones in your life, and and all the blessings. So again, thank you very, very much. Bye.
Let me make sure I have everything.
And the
Oh, thank you.
progress.